Pokemon Go's best event of the year has come and gone, so did GoFest 2024 live up to the hype? Well, join us as we discuss the good, the bad, and everything in between with this year's flagship event. So with that said, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. So GoFest 2024 has been hyped up for a while now, as it seemed like the natural progression from last season's focus on the remaining Ultra Beasts. In fact, this year in GoFest kind of seemed like a sequel to 2022, with that year bringing the first Ultra Beasts of the game, and this year bringing the last of the Ultra Beasts, as well as Necrozma. Now with GoFest 2022 receiving the lowest rank on our recent Ranking GoFest video, how did 2024 compare? Well, let's break it down by starting with the good that came from this year's event. In terms of the spawns, I give GoFest 2024 a lot of praise for this category. There were a lot of solid Pokemon available, and unlike 2022's non-shiny filler choices, this year's Pokemon roster was nearly all shiny eligible. The only two Pokemon who couldn't be shiny were Carbink and Maractus. However, Carbink is still a massive player in PvP, while Maractus is a regional that got its first global debut. So that's definitely not bad in my opinion. But along with Maractus, I was also excited to see them bring back some older regionals with boosted shiny rates, such as Durant, Heatmore, and Corsola. Plus, there was a good selection of more uncommon shinies as well, including Spinarak, Tyrunt, Amara, and Golett. We'll have more to say about the spawns in the cons section coming up next, but I'd say they were mostly great overall. But up next, let's talk about the costume Pokemon for 2024. I think this year we had a really good selection available, including the two costume Pikachu, as well as the Scarf Umbreon and Espeon variants. Now when it came to the Pikachus, I'm really glad they only kept it at 2, because over the past few years we've had 4 different costume Pikachus to collect, and that's usually exhausting for one event. And Pikachu really isn't that exciting of a Pokemon, so only having 2 available for this event was definitely a relief. But along with the Pikachus, I was also a fan of the Scarf Espeon and Umbreon introduced with this event. These costumes were really unique, and they were also rare, appearing through incense, field research tasks, and in the wild if you were extremely lucky. So between their rarity and unique design, I do think that these were some of the best costumes that we've seen in a while. Also, side note, I did end up getting a shiny Espeon from a field research task early on day 1, so that was one of my most exciting catches from GoFest this year. But next up, let's talk about the GoFest raids. Day 1 saw the Ultra Beast return, plus the global debut of base form Necrozma. Obviously, it was great to see all the Ultra Beasts return, especially with the 3 region-locked Ultra Beasts spawning globally on day 1. In our raid group, we saw people getting hundos of Xurkitree and Pheromosa, who both normally don't exist within our region. It was also a nice time to shiny hunt them as well. Chris got his hands on a shiny Xurkitree, and others with us managed to get Celesteela and Pheromosa as well. In fact, one person in our group was extremely lucky and got a Shundo Pheromosa with the background. So that was pretty incredible to witness. Now while they weren't really promoted for this event, we also saw Stakataka and Blacephalon spawning in the raid pool as well. However, we did notice they weren't spawning as frequently during this event, which I thought was nice. After all, we just had these Ultra Beasts available during a recent event, so keeping them less frequent gave players ample opportunity to hunt for the other shiny Ultra Beasts. And of course, we can't forget about the global debut of Necrozma. Being able to hunt for a shiny or good IV Necrozma on the first day was a pretty fun experience in my opinion. And that only got amplified during the second day of GoFest, when all the other Ultra Beasts vanished and were replaced by the 2 fusion forms of Necrozma. And these 2 were just as exciting as the previous bosses, as they're some of the strongest Pokemon currently available in the game. They're both top tier options in raids and PvP, and they're also permanent forms, so you're not restricted to the time you can use them. And while 1000 energy is a lot to fuse these 2 Pokemon, Niantic did provide some free codes before the event for a total of 200 fusion energy for both fusions. So between both days of 2024, I'd say that the raid selection was pretty great. And while there were some negatives that we'll go over later, I honestly think this is one of the strongest selections they've had for a GoFest, perhaps only being under Mega Rayquaza from last year. Now another aspect that was great about the raids for this event was their timeline. For previous GoFests, we've seen the raids popping at 10 AM local time. However, for this event, the raids started spawning each day at 5 AM local time, and they didn't stop spawning until 8 PM. We thought this was especially great as it allowed people to get a head start to raiding for both good IVs and shinies, so when GoFest actually started, players weren't overwhelmed between catching and shiny hunting, as well as raiding this event. Now, there was one last element that I think was pretty great with this GoFest event, and that was the surprise addition of Community Day Legacy Moves. This was a feature that wasn't announced prior to GoFest happening. However, shortly after it began, reports started circulating that several Legacy moves were available through Evolution. These included Earth Power on Garchomp, Frenzy Plant on Superior, Brutal Swing on Hydreigon, as well as a few others. Gotta be honest though, it would have been more ideal if these were announced in advance, but it was still a great addition to have exclusive moves available. And those are going to be a lot of the positive aspects that we saw with GoFest 2024. But with that said, there were also some less than stellar aspects as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass the mic to Chris to discuss the bad with this event. So take it away, Chris.
So keeping on the topic of Community Day moves that you just talked about, there was one small annoyance that came with them. While Umbreon and Espeon got Last Resort through Evolution during GoFest, the costumed variants that were actually spawning during the event did not, which was pretty silly to leave out. Also, there were some negative aspects to the raids. The bosses were all great, but at the same time, it did make it sort of hectic to try and juggle all the different raid bosses, especially on day 1. Having the lead up week of raids and raids popping at 5 AM each day was still nice, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't overwhelmed. Our group had people wanting to raid Buzzwole, Nihilego, Necrozma, Xurkitree, and more, but there were only so many of each raid at a time. I myself netted a perfect Kartana, which I was super happy with, but I do wish I had extra time to raid it for the shiny. Still, this isn't the worst problem to have, all things considered. Also, with the fusion raids, how they handled the fusion energy was certainly interesting. Rather than like Mega Energy, where how much you got was determined by how fast you beat the raid, the fusion energy was incorporated into the reward bundles of the raids. Obviously, beating a fusion raid faster would give you more reward bundles, but you could still end up getting as low as 70 or 80 energy. It did balance out in the end, but the consistency was still a gripe. Now, while James and I both played the ticketed GoFest experience, we did know some others who played the event without a ticket, and it was disappointing to see them leave after just a couple raids. I know that the ticket provided free passes each day, but I wouldn't have minded non-ticketed players getting at least 1 or 2 extra passes. That's just a general GoFest issue though, not one specific to this year. Another issue we had with Day 2 was the lack of field research for the new shinies. Day 1 had rotating habitat research for encounters with all the new shiny releases, including Crabrawler, Emolga, and Ducklet. But Day 2 was more dedicated to the costume Pokémon, which was still nice, but not having any of the other Pokémon in field research was still a letdown. Now, speaking to the spawns for the event, we did praise them earlier, but I will also remark that there were a decent selection of more filler Pokémon, including more common choices like Yungoos and various Community Day Pokémon like Hoppip and Snivy. Still, I don't think the spawns were awful by any means. What was definitely disappointing though was the treatment of Jangmo-O. Past Global GoFests have had the featured dragon type in decent supply. Not common, but you felt like you saw it spawn every so often. This year though, our group barely seemed to encounter the Gen 7 pseudo. Myself, I got 4 Jangmo-O on Incense and 2 in the wild, and for roughly 16 hours of gameplay, that's definitely disappointing. Past years it felt like Gumi, Axew, Dino, and Gible all appeared more frequently than Jangmo-O this year. It'll likely get a calm day next June, so it's not a huge deal, but it was disappointing nonetheless. But that's just about it for the bad of GoFest 2024. None of those issues were major, so I'd say the good vastly outweighed the bad. Let's get back to James though as we wrap up with our final thoughts on this year's event.
And overall, I would agree with that point. While the event did have some issues, I think the good really outweighed the bad. So getting back to the big question, how would we rank GoFest 2024? Well, if we were to include it with our previous GoFest rankings, I'd say it would be the second best global GoFest we've seen, just below 2023. Last year's spawns, bonuses, and of course Mega Rayquaza were truly outstanding and hard to beat, but this year definitely gave 2023 a run for its money. As for anything negative we've said about GoFest, I do really think that Niantic has found their footing with these global events, and we're excited to see what next year's flagship event has in store. And now we want to know about your experience with GoFest 2024. Did you have a good or bad experience? And are there any critiques that you want to add that we didn't mention? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reviews about the event, so be sure to leave them in the comments below. And stay tuned for future speculation videos for upcoming events, including our predictions for next year's GoFest and the highly likely Go Tour Unova next February. Plus, we'll also have a speculation analysis on Black and White Kyurem now that we know how fusions are going to work in Pokemon Go. You're not going to want to miss any of these videos, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them. Until next time, though, thank you all so much for watching. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in the next one.